Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Passport to Wealth, the podcast that takes you on a journey through navigating your finances as a U.S. expat. I'm your host, Arielle Tucker, a certified financial planner and enrolled agent focusing on cross-border planning for U.S. expats. And I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Savannah Chafin, a CFP candidate, enrolled agent, and self-declared expat tax nerd, here to guide you through the maze of life and finances across borders and share the inspiring stories of fellow U.S. expats who have navigated the process.
Hi, Savannah.
Hi, Arielle.
Okay, so today we're having like a little bit of a reunion, right? Because we have Jordan with us, and we're so excited because for all of you listening, last year at Connected Financial Planning, where Savannah and I both work, we were working with Jordan, who is this amazing paraplanner. And he had reached out to me on LinkedIn. I remember being totally like, who is this guy reaching out to me on LinkedIn? It was super sketch. And then I went to the XYPN conference, and one of your friends or colleagues walked up to me and she's like, "Do you know Jordan?" I was like, "Funny you should say this, because this guy reached out to me on LinkedIn." And she's like, no, he's great. You need to talk to him. And I was like, okay, then I'll talk to him if someone else like vets him a little bit. And so then we started talking, and then you came in last year and you were like amazing help. So anyways, I'm going to have you do your own introduction and say where you are now, what you're doing, and then we'll just dig into the conversation today.
Yeah, that sounds great. It's nice to have the connection, the backdoor referral in is kind of the character reference, I guess, right? So, but thanks for having me. I'm a certified financial planner and a founder of Make the Memory Financial Planning. So we are a financial planning firm, really focused on trying to help people utilize their finances to maximize their life experiences. So maximizing their memories, their experiences with their communities, and really focusing on a little bit more of like the softer side and how do we actually use money to elevate our lives. And I'm working in Germany, so I'm living and working in Germany. So we have an office here, and before that, I was working in the UK. I worked for a short time in Puerto Rico, kind of all over the US, done a lot of traveling there as well. So it's been kind of a fun experience starting to put all the pieces together overseas. So.
Yeah, and can you go back a step and just kind of expand on what even got you overseas, right? We hear this all the time. People are like, how can I move abroad? Well, how did you move abroad?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you would have asked me or talked to somebody who knew me 10 years ago, they would say Jordan is never going overseas. There's no way that they would have guessed that I would have been overseas. But when I look back at my experience, what happened is I graduated college, started working in the financial planning industry, did my CFP, and I was still in the early stages, but I was working. And what kind of hit me one day was like, I don't know that I want to, I don't know that I'm built for like this traditional 9 to 5 in the office. If you know me, I really hate wearing suits. So like wearing the suit every day, going in every
Yeah, you look
day.
like you're a lumberjack today. For those
The beard plus the shirt.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so it kind of hit me, and so I wanted to do a little bit different style of financial planning and kind of incorporate my life into it. And what door opened for me was actually working military contracts, providing financial counseling, and helping military families overseas. And that door opened to me. And I talked to my wife and I. We weren't married at the time, and we were dating, and we're like, is there something that we should do? And we were just like, yeah, let's do it. So the company was like, where do you want to go? And I said, send me to Europe. They said, yeah, perfect. You're going to Puerto Rico. And
same continent, right?
It was a ton of fun. It was totally worth it. And so I was always a little bit at the whim and the will of the company and where they needed people. But that's what it eventually brought me overseas. As I started with them, and then they said, okay, next up, if you want, you can go to England. And I said, yeah, that sounds fantastic. So I spent 3 years working with the Air Force there. And then after that, they sent me to Germany, and I was working with the Army in Germany.
So you also changed like service branches, the support. And I'm curious because we really don't do a lot of military, and I know that this has kind of been your focus. Is are there different planning opportunities or maybe more considerations between different branches of the, the military?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of it is focused around lifestyle, right? So like the benefits, a lot of the benefits are pretty consistent overall. Like the pay scales are the same, even though they all poke fun at each other and say, the Air Force makes more money than the Army, but from a pay scale perspective and the allowances, all of that is structured very similarly. Where things are shifting is how the career trajectory looks for an individual. Like in the Air Force, they have a lot more specialized careers. So you're talking pilots, you're talking medical. They have medical in many different logistics, and so the career trajectory looks a lot different, and you're kind of locked in. And then the locations that you can go. So sometimes you're in a place for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and sometimes you can even stay a lot longer. So when we're looking at the planning considerations for military families and government individuals and families going overseas, we're talking a lot about stability, getting set up, tearing your life back down again, and then packing up and going all over again. And then how do you navigate these different lives? And you kind of leave like a trail, like a breadcrumb trail of financial pieces here and there, and then making sure everything is consistent, and then not having to restart your financial life, because if without planning, many people they do a really good job savings, and then we have to stop. Maybe one of the spouses has to stop working. You have to move to a new place, start all over again, and kind of rebuild that life.
Yeah,
So.
it's a hard life. And I'm curious with like, what are some of the differences that you saw, like living in Puerto Rico to the UK to Germany? Like, those places to me seem like vastly different countries, even though they all,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Oh, they are. The lifestyles are entirely different, and each place has a different kind of way of doing everything. So you have cultural changes from like the day to day. Like so, like if you're in Puerto Rico, Sunday night you go to the beach, everybody's dancing, barbecuing, playing music, having a good time. And in Germany on Sunday night, there you can
don't
you can
even
hear
flush the
pin drops.
toilet. Don't flush the toilet after 10 p.m. in Germany.
Yeah,
Can't dream of going to the grocery store, anything like that.
Exactly. I was talking with a friend, and he said that his neighbors complain that he closes the door too loudly. All of those considerations it's totally different. So when you go from one to another, you really have to just go in with an open mind and kind of learn, like, what's this, what's it going to be like. And the nice thing is you start to enjoy different pieces of it. Like the peace and quiet is sometimes really nice on a Sunday, but also like going out and having a lot of fun on a Sunday is really nice as well.
And I'm curious, aside from kind of like the cultural adaptation you had to go through, what was it like technically? Because when you first went abroad, right, you were under like contract through the military. What was the shift? Because now I assume that you're not. So what was the shift going from, I guess, being under that contract to just living in Germany?
So I've done a few shifts. So I've gone like under contract, away from contract, back under contract, and kind of back and forth. But there's a few big shifts, like from a technical perspective, is when you are under contract and you can basically walk into the country with you have to have all your approvals and everything. All your approvals go through the U.S. government. They get everything put together. They give you the paperwork, and then you can basically just enter, right? But you're not a
Mm-hmm.
resident. So that's kind of the interesting thing, is you're not actually resident in that country, and then each country has different tax. Each country and each contract has different tax impacts. So some people are working in a little bit of a hybrid where they actually owe taxes to Germany, but not all of it. They have all the social contributions, all of those types of things waived. And then other people say, nope, you're not resident, so you're only here, so you're here as a transient individual, right? Now when I went to England, I had to go through a full visa process. So they said, yeah, okay, you're under a contract, but you have to enter England as an employee, right? So each country is going to be a little bit different. So they gave us some tax exclusions for myself, but not for my wife, right? So you have to kind of navigate on the both sides. And then when you go back and you start to swap, it's kind of interesting because you're almost starting fresh. like in Germany, so when we go from the military side to the normal side, they don't really know. They say, yeah, okay, we know that you're here, but now you got to sign up for the the social contributions, the insurances. You have to do a whole new visa application, all of that from like a paperwork perspective to get your visas and get set up. So you basically kind of show up on the map, so to speak, within Germany after you do it. So.
That sounds like a lot of paperwork and hassle, especially for, I mean, it sounds like military families then or military contractors really have to like navigate each contract and really understand what are their obligations to the US, to the local country, and like navigate that very closely because you screw something up, you could leave the country and not be allowed back in, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things to consider, and I mean, let's start with taxes. Like taxes is kind of one of the biggest ones that kind of starts people looking in and starting to think about it. Is properly navigating the tax consideration. Like some people are, claiming foreign earned income exclusions when they're, really should be doing foreign tax credits because they're paying in, on the German system, right? Or they're just paying both. People are like aren't necessarily paying attention to where all the taxes are going. And then there's all of you still fall under a lot of these European regulations, and it can be really difficult to have your like manage your investments. I mean, you guys see this all the time, but just because you don't have a specific visa and you're just here for work, many of the broker dealers are going to say, no, you're overseas, we can't have this, right? And even just like the pace of everything, so opening an account, let's say with Vanguard overseas, they need a wet signature and you need to start mailing all of this in. So like a lot of that kind of stuff it takes a lot of time, but then buttoning it up where it's like, hey, we got the taxes all put together. The plan is good to go, and then we got to make sure that you can enter. And then if you say I'm staying for 5 years, and then I'm going to go to Japan for 5 years, then we have to navigate, a whole new change. Make sure that you exit Germany properly. That there's all your bills and your deposits and like the housing and stuff is another big area as well. So.
Oh, you are speaking our love language when you talk about tax. So we're here we're here for it. Savannah and I are just over here lighting up like yes.
I have endless questions in my head, honestly, but probably too much to dive into today.
Okay, I do have a question on the address because I notice we don't do a lot of military, but I did notice a lot of military families have this like this special address, or like when you're like going and you're ordering something on Costco, you'll see it has like armed forces a special address. Is that
Yep.
also available for contractors, or is that just like true armed forces personnel that are on a
It,
base?
It can be. Everything is piecemeal, right? So some people they have a mailbox, right? And there's even like when you look at the military, like there's stores on the bases and all that you can shop in. Some people can get those benefits. Some people can't. Some people can get some of the benefits, that those type of things. With a lot of the retirees, so let's say you're a service member or a government employee and you retire and you decide to stay abroad, then they give you limited access. So they can send letters, but they're not allowed to receive packages and such. But but for the service members, I mean, I've seen people shipping tires from the U.S., for their cars through these and their big boxes and I
Tough
mean,
boxes.
yeah, exactly.
Because they pay the U.S. shipping rate, right? That's the yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very nice perk of it, where they can just pay U.S. shipping rates, and then it shows up there. So
Okay, yeah, I would order everything. Pottery Barn couch, here it comes.
yeah, yeah. But it's a really nice way. Like the with the military community, it's super nice because you have like this mix of cultures, right? Where you still have all the U.S. The U.S. Service members and military people, and you can still mail and ship, and then there's U.S. stores, so you can get some of those, guilty pleasures from the grocery store that you can't find elsewhere, which is super nice. But then you still have access to, all of the, like here all the German, amenities and experiences and the ability to travel as well, which is just quite cool.
That's great.
And speaking of building a community, I know like when you're in military service, or I'm assuming it's the same under contracting, it's really easy to build a community, right? Because you're like living on base, or you're surrounded by fellow military members. But what was that transition like for you, going from kind of having that community to just being someone living in Germany? How did you go about really building out your social circle?
For me, it was okay because I spent a lot of time intentionally doing it ahead of time. Is really focusing on, what communities am I going to build? What am I focusing on? Like how can I start to build friendships? In the military community, one of the biggest difficulties is that it's so transient. So people are there for 2 3 years, then they're gone, right? And so I was really intentional about like, okay, let's try to make more of a stable community group. And for me, it's I love sports, so I play ultimate frisbee. I love going skiing. I love going hiking and all of these things. So in Germany, what I did is I started integrating into the sports clubs. And there's a club for anything in Germany, which is a pretty fun experience. And then it's a little bit easier. You have some conversation in common, and you can start talking about skiing, and you can go on a trip together. Those types of things. But you really need to kind of put yourself out there. If you're a little too shy, then sometimes it won't happen. But making sure you're putting yourself out there, asking questions, getting to know people, and even with the language barrier, it can be difficult. But just try to be bold. Is the Yeah.
I think that's like such good advice. Just try to be bold. And that's like a good mantra for an aspiring or a current expat. Like, just, it's okay. Yeah. Keep moving forward. Good days, bad days, hard days. Keep moving
Yeah.
forward. Be bold. Yes. I love that. Okay. I think we've got time for one more question. I really want you to provide some advice for people who are maybe just thinking about moving abroad or recently landed. What kind of pointers can you share with them from your own experience?
Yeah. There's a lot, right? When you're looking to leave and set up a whole new life in another place, I think one of the biggest things, especially as a financial planner, the first place that my mind goes is planning financially, right? Is thinking about this overall financially. We kind of touched on the tax stuff, but when you actually are moving, there's so much in the beginning. And one piece is never underestimate having a really solid emergency fund. There are going to be so many expenses on the front end, from vehicles and deposits and banking. How do we navigate the foreign exchange, all the fees and all of that kind of stuff. So really focusing on having a solid emergency fund is going to be super helpful. And then as much as you can learn and reach out to people, and kind of build a community around this financial life, this new financial life of yours, is going to help with the overall information flow. Because I mean, you guys know that you see this every day, and this is something that was very surprising to me when I started looking and learning more in the expat or cross-border world. Is the information is not super clear, and it's not
The
always
the
relevant
answer
to
is
you.
always it depends. It depends.
Yeah,
That's the answer.
If you can find anything on the topic in general. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And the thing that's strange is when you think about it, and you're like, well, the puzzle pieces don't fit together perfectly, and that's where the it depends. And so from a financial perspective, I think that's the biggest thing, is kind of try to prepare as much as you can. Build a really really strong team around yourself. But from the personal side, I would say the one thing that really stuck with me, that keeps sticking in my head from all these years of moving and all this, is home really changes. And so, like, your friends, your connections and your friends and your family, be very intentional about maintaining those and keeping those. And then once you go to a new place, you're going to have all of the emotions. You're going to be super excited. You're going to be super happy. You're going to be super sad. You're going to be homesick. You're going to be lonely. All of these things are going to happen. And then you're going to settle in. Things are going to get much more comfortable. And then you're going to go home at some point, maybe after 1 year or 2 years or whatever it is. And then you're going to be like, well, home is so different, right? Part of my home is there. Part of my home is over here. And then you just kind of leave a little bit of a of a trail of yourself, or you're kind of taking a little piece here and there with you, which is kind of interesting because for me now I look back and say, where is home? Like I don't know. Maybe it's back in Wisconsin or Minnesota, but maybe it's not. So.
Oh, yeah. I think that is such a shared sentiment. And I know, Savannah, we've talked about that on the podcast as well before, that feeling of home, and like the ever evolving emotions. Like sometimes I'm just like driving to the grocery store and then I look up and I'm like, oh, there's the Alps. Like this is my reality is a little different. Like, so I love that. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was great to catch up with you. We'll be sure to link all your details, and are just so excited for you and your continued success and growth. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes packed with insights and stories to empower your global financial journey. This is Passport to Wealth, where your financial future knows no borders.
The information provided in this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered professional, financial, or tax advice.
We strongly recommend consulting with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, or other appropriate expert before making any financial decisions or taking action based on the content discussed in this episode.
Your personal financial situation is unique, and a professional can provide tailored advice to meet your specific needs.